I spent about half an hour at my favorite watering hole. The waitress with the cocktail had just served the second mug of beer and taken away the empty one. I was here because I needed to think about something. Something at home just wasn't right, and I couldn't figure out why. As everyone knows, serious contemplation is best done with alcohol. My wife's glorious attitude had been changing over the past couple of months or so. When I tried to discuss it with her and asked what happened, she simply shut me out. She started complaining quite often about our finances. I couldn't truly understand it since I was earning really good money. We had everything we needed, and there was still enough left to enjoy some of the finer things in life. With our investments and other assets, we were worth around $5 million. Everything was going well, but she behaved as if we were just constantly at odds with each other. Interestingly, the country club membership I gave her 6 months ago seemed to have no value. Yes, I know what you're thinking. I thought the same thing. The most logical explanation is that she's having an affair and is contemplating a switch. There were a couple of problems with this. Firstly, we didn't have a prenuptial agreement. That would mean I'd be destroyed in a divorce. Secondly, I had no evidence of her infidelity. Anyway, I had just taken a sip of my second beer when I saw her enter the bar. No, it wasn't my wife, who supposedly was out with the girls tonight. I had no idea who she was, but she was a real beauty. All heads in the bar turned to her, watching as she quickly scanned the room and then headed straight for me. When she approached the booth where I was sitting, she just slid in opposite me, not even saying boo. She looked me over for a minute, then spoke. "Alan Colton." I just nodded. The waitress quickly came over and took her order for a glass of white wine. "My name is Alyssa Holmes. I have a bunch of information for you that I think could be useful. I also have a proposal for you on how best to use this information." "All right," I replied. "What will this information cost me?" She smiled. "It won't cost you a cent. In fact, if you accept my offer, it might even ensure the preservation of most of your assets, more than you could get otherwise." "Okay, what information do you have?" "First off, your wife is cheating on you." "And how do you know that? Is there any proof?" "I know because she's sleeping with my brother. I have photos, videos, audio, and notarized statements about it. I'm ready to give you all of it." "Wow, you must really hate your brother if you're throwing him under the bus like this." Her smile lit up the entire bar. "Quite the opposite, in fact. I'm here on his behalf. He sent me to talk to you while she's occupied with him." I was confused. If he's stealing her away from me, why would he try to help me? I mean, I've read all these stories about cheating wives, and in most of them, the wife catches the poor fool off guard so he can't prepare and put up a fight. If you warn me, I can start preparing and move assets to reduce the amount the courts would order me to pay her. Isn't that counterproductive for him? Usually, yes. This case is entirely different. You see, we don't want you insisting on a divorce. Using this information, by all means, take the opportunity to move assets and do what you need to do, but don't file for divorce. Don't even let her know you suspect her betrayal. We'll help with the divorce. We'll have a dossier on her with practically everything you need." "How will you do that?" "Lord knows Gloria loves money. I can't imagine her just giving up half of our assets and significant alimony payments." Her smile turned midnight into a bright sunny day. I would probably die of radiation exposure if exposed to her smile for too long. All right, there are a couple of things to keep in mind. Firstly, my brother is a really good guy. When he started a relationship with your wife, he had no idea she was married. She essentially came onto him just 2 weeks ago. The background check came back, and we found out she was married. It took another week to conduct additional checks and gather all the necessary information to make sure she wasn't divorced or separated from her husband. This information also indicates that she just wants to negotiate. You're quite wealthy, but we are much wealthier. Our data shows that you're worth around $5,164,000, which includes the 1968 G2 you're planning to buy for about $10,000 less than it's actually worth. She saw the incredulous look on my face. Yes, we have extremely detailed information in our ledger. You have to be very careful about who you're dealing with. We also found out that you're a very decent and honest person. That's why we decided to go this route. Alright, it seems you're putting me at a disadvantage because you have all this information about me, but I know nothing about you. I understand. I gave you my name. My brother's name is Brad Holmes. A quick internet search should provide enough background information about us to answer any questions. Also, feel free to hire a paid firm to check our background. You can even send us the bill for it if you want. Alright, I'll need to verify everything before I commit to anything. So, what's the plan? One more thing you need to know, Brad has been married before. She cheated on him and slept around for money. He caught her in the act. Fortunately, they had a prenup with really harsh penalties for infidelity. Essentially, she left with the clothes on her back and whatever she could fit into 2 suitcases. Brad despises cheaters and gold diggers. Usually, he's a really good guy, but he can be ruthless when he discovers someone trying to take advantage of him. So, he'll be leading her on for the next few months. Eventually, he'll convince her to file for divorce so she can marry him. However, one condition will be that she asks you for absolutely nothing. He'll convince her that she won't need any of your assets because my brother is worth over $500 million. In about 2 months, he'll propose to her. She'll have to admit to him that she's married. According to the emails she sent to her friend, she plans to tell him that you two have been separated for a long time but never actually divorced. She intends to paint you as the bad guy and claim that you've been unfaithful throughout the entire marriage. You, of course, will threaten to fight the divorce. My brother will convince her to give you everything to expedite the divorce so they can get married. You get everything, and she gets nothing. Once the final divorce decision is made, Brad will reveal the lies she told him. He'll tell her he can't trust a woman who betrayed her husband. He'll dump her and leave her with nothing. It seems I really have nothing to lose and everything to gain here. Even if everything you're telling me is nonsense, I can still protect myself by hiding assets and preparing to divorce this woman. I need the information you have, and I'd also like to meet your brother since he apparently didn't know she was married. I have no grievances against him, so you don't have to worry about any physical reaction from me if he's as good a guy as you say. And if what you've told me is true, maybe we can even become friends. Once again, that radiant smile appeared. You're a good man, Adam Colton. I think you and Brad will get along just fine. With those words, she finished her wine, stood up, and walked out the door. The next 2 months were supposed to bring me an Oscar. I put in just enough effort being intimate with Gloria to keep her from suspecting anything. Of course, I had always been confused by this. I didn't mind out a couple of weeks later. I did indeed meet Alyssa and Brad for a lengthy dinner. I also managed to meet Alyssa for dinner a few times when Gloria was elsewhere with Brad. Gloria and I had become more like platonic roommates than a married couple. Alyssa, it pains me to do this, but I think we should step back for a while. I told her this over dinner just over a month after our first meeting. Really? But we get along so well. Yes, that's the thing. Right now, we get along too well. I'm not like Gloria. I'm a lone wolf. I don't betray the woman I'm with. Sure, Gloria and I don't have a special relationship anymore, but she's still my wife. I just can't enter into another relationship until our divorce is final. The problem here is that I'm developing real feelings for you. I can't compromise my morals by starting a relationship with a woman while I'm still connected to another. Plus, I care about you so much that I don't want to ruin what could be between us by sinking to her level and entering into another relationship before my current marriage is completely over. Alyssa sighed heavily. I understand. You're a good man, Adam. I admire your ethics and sense of right and wrong. It's one of the things I admire most about you and probably the main reason I find myself falling in love with you. Gloria is still too foolish to understand it. Fine, we'll step back for a while, but damn me if I wait longer than necessary. Let's finish dinner, and then you'll take me dancing. Once you drop me off at home, I'll call Brad and ask him to pull the trigger. It's a month earlier than we planned, but Gloria is too foolish to realize it. Seriously, what kind of foolish woman would leave such an amazing husband like you? Alyssa was an enthusiastic dancer. The movements her body made on the floor during fast dances, how she pressed against me during slow dances, despite the fact that it was obvious we were together. Several men approached our table while we were taking a break to invite her to dance. It turned out to be amusing. A daring pair approached and politely asked if I would allow them to dance with her. I replied that she could dance with them if she wished. Alyssa always objected, explaining that she saved all her dances just for me. Alyssa stole my soul as I escorted her to the door that night. She turned, put her hands on my cheeks, and gave me a soul-stealing kiss. She replaced my soul with hers as the kiss deepened. It went on, eventually ending, and we were both breathing heavily. You have no idea how much I want to take you inside with me, she chuckled. Probably about as much as I want to pick you up and carry you inside. Nevertheless, it would be wrong, and I can't risk us regretting it. Think about how much better it will be for us to wait and do everything right. You and your morals, she smiled. Why did I have to fall in love with someone so noble? Alyssa, on the day my official divorce decree is issued, I will be on my knees at your door, holding a ring in one hand and a signed prenuptial agreement in the other. I'm not here for your money. Even if everything goes wrong and I have to give this woman most of my assets, I'll still have enough of my own money that I won't need yours. I love you, Alyssa. That's all that matters to me. My ring size is 6.5. Don't worry about the prenuptial agreement. I asked my lawyer to draft it 2 weeks ago. Just send me your lawyer's contact information, and a copy will be sent to him. It happened a week later. No, Alyssa and I are not getting together. It was a Friday evening. I returned home from work to find Gloria and Brad sitting on the couch. I noticed Brad's smirk and a subtle nod in my direction. Honey, Gloria began, we need to talk. Surveying the situation, I largely understood what was happening. It also helped that Alyssa had warned me about it earlier that same day. The setup involved Gloria and Brad sitting on the couch next to each other. On the coffee table were 2 glasses and a half-empty bottle of wine. Also on the coffee table was an envelope made of thick paper. Yes, as expected, I walked over to the couch and extended my hand. Hello, I'm Adam. I see you're drinking wine, but I prefer craft beer. I'm going to grab myself a beer, or do you prefer wine? Nice to meet you, I'm Brad. I'd actually prefer a beer if you don't mind. Thanks. I returned a couple of minutes later with the purchased beer. Being a good host, I opened both right in front of them so they could be sure I hadn't tampered with them. After popping the bottle caps, taking a sip, we both sat, he on the couch as before, and I in my deep chair. So, I began, what do we need to talk about? Well, Adam, Gloria started, this will probably be a shock for you, but I want a divorce. I didn't want it to happen, but Brad and I just fell in love with each other. We're soulmates. I regret it, but our marriage hasn't been that great for some time, and then I met Brad. It just happened. Now is the time for both of us to end this so that Brad and I can start building a new life together. She even managed to take a couple of sips and shed a tear or two. It seemed I'd have serious competition for the Oscar. She did a pretty good job of portraying the sorrowful wife. Well, Gloria, this is really a shock to me. Yes, we've had a few problems, but that's mainly because you kept shutting me out. I asked several times what was wrong and how I could help, but you never answered me. I tried to do more for you. I tried to take you on more romantic dates, but you always had other things to do. I brought you flowers, and you just ignored them. When I tried to get closer, you constantly pushed me away. You never mentioned anything I could do to help solve our problems. I even suggested counseling, but you refused. You said Brad is your soulmate, but earlier you said I was your soulmate when we got married. If there was a problem in our marriage, you should have discussed it with me first so we could work on it and fix it, instead of going out and finding another lover. Now, instead of working with your husband to fix our marriage, you're just blindsiding me with divorce papers. I'm not sure we can't still fix everything. No, Adam, it's too late for that. Here are the documents. I'm very fair in asset division. Asset division? You're lying and betraying me, spending the money I bring home on yourself, and you think you deserve to be paid for it? I'm breaking my back to provide you with a great life, and in return, you betray and leave me. Nonsense. Good luck getting the divorce you want anytime soon. If I have to pay you anything, it'll be almost nothing. I'm hiring the most expensive legal team I can find with the sole goal of dragging this out as long as possible and extracting as much money as possible so that when it finally ends in a couple of years, there will be nothing left to pay you. That's when Brad made his move. Okay, Adam, listen. I regret this. When we first met, I didn't even know she was married. By the time I found out, we were already deeply in love with each other. It's clear that while you love Gloria, she no longer loves you. I understand your position here. The thing is, Gloria doesn't want to be married to you anymore, no matter how you fight it. As you said, the divorce will eventually happen. Fighting it will only hand over most of your assets to the lawyers. Of course, it'll reduce the amount you'll have to pay her, but it will also result in you losing almost everything. There's no need for that since we plan to get married as soon as the divorce is finalized. You won't have to pay any spousal support. Also, I'm a very wealthy man, so Gloria really doesn't need to take anything from your assets. In fact, everything she'll get from the divorce will be a drop in the bucket compared to the wealth she'll gain when she marries me. Look, you keep the house, your pension, all savings and investments, and half of what's in the current account. She leaves with half the money in the current account, all her clothes, personal items, and the car. Frankly, she won't need anything else after we get married. Oh, okay, I reluctantly agreed, except that she returns her engagement rings and all the jewelry I inherited from my family. I also want the expensive jewelry we keep in the safe. I bought it with the assumption that we would eventually pass it down to our children and grandchildren as a family heirloom. Brad turned to Gloria. Remember we discussed this? We've already caused him enough pain with what we've done. It's better to end this quickly so we can get married and start our new life sooner. You're right, Brad. I won't need his money anyway once we get married. Let's formalize and sign the new papers. With these words, we toasted to our agreement, and they left. Now, I know some of you out there might think I'm a heartless person, leaving just a couple of dollars in the joint account. You would be wrong. It might raise suspicion with her. Usually, we tried to keep around $10,000 in the account. I left that untouched. She had several designer dresses, expensive shoes, and other accessories. Most men don't realize, but they give away quite a bit when they ignore their wives' closets in a divorce. On the retail market, Gloria's clothing was worth almost $60,000. There's quite a good market online for high-quality used women's clothing. Of course, you can't get the full retail price, but you can get at least a percentage of it. Her car was a year-old Lexus paid for in cash. A week later, my lawyer and I met with them in her lawyer's office. Her lawyer emphasized that he strongly advised his client to refrain from the proposed asset division. It was mostly 90% for me and 10% for Gloria, but it doesn't matter. Once the divorce is finalized, Brad and I will get married, and that will eliminate alimony. I won't need other assets anyway, I just want this to end as soon as possible so I can move on with my life." We signed all the papers, and he asked his notary assistant to notarize everything. Now, it was just a waiting game until the final decree was issued. Meanwhile, Alice and I got to know each other much better. We spent most of our free time together. No, we didn't engage in lovemaking. God knows we both wanted it, and we came close more than once, but we decided to wait until the final decision on the divorce. Brad and Gloria also continued their relationship. She even moved in with him. Brad, Alice, and I formulated and refined our plans for the finale. The waiting period passed. I received the final notice by mail a day before I needed to make a lasting impression. After all, I was now free from my betraying wife and was about to enter the next stage of my life, now with no wife spending all my money on frivolous things. I could afford to spend a little cash on things I truly wanted. I had a grin from ear to ear as I ascended the steps and entered the mansion. This was supposed to be an epic night. Just before stepping through the open door, I caught a glimpse of the next arrival. It turned the night from merely epic to downright legendary. I couldn't help but burst into laughter. "So, you're a bit confused?" "That's understandable. I attended the divorce party. It was held in celebration of the final decision on the divorce between Gloria and me. I had an official invitation to attend. No, I wasn't planning to ruin Gloria's party. All of this was part of the plan. The party took place in Dave's mansion. While it wasn't a surprise party, there were expected to be a few surprises throughout the evening. It was a very high-class event designed to introduce a new participant into Dave and Alice's social circle. Gloria had been looking forward to this event for the past 2 months since its planning began. Not no sooner had I crossed the threshold than Alice approached me. Her left arm slid through the crook of my right arm, and we touched. No one could wipe the smile off my face with nuclear weapons. She began leading me around the room, introducing me to influential figures in society. We were halfway across the grand ballroom when it happened. "What is he doing here?" I heard a piercing scream from a very familiar voice. Suddenly, we found ourselves face to face with Gloria and Dave. Needless to say, Gloria wasn't too thrilled to see me at her special evening. Not only was I the ex-husband she had just dumped, but it would be very awkward if her new man proposed to her in my presence so soon after our divorce. "I'm sorry, Gloria," Dave began, "but it seems my sister and the ex-husband have become something of a talking point." I couldn't deny her the invitation of her +1, as the invitation did specify +1. "Whatever," Gloria huffed. Then looking at me, she continued, "Gloria, I assure you that in honor of the wonderful years we spent together, I will behave at my best. I understand how much this evening means to you, and I'll do everything in my power to make sure you can look back on this night as the event that catapulted you into the new life you deserve. I loved only you for many years, Gloria. I'll do everything I can to make tonight launch you straight into the new life you deserve." Hey, was it my fault that she misinterpreted what I said? I wasn't lying. So, her radiant smile indicated that she took my words as friendly. Was it my fault? It was 3 hours later. Dinner was over and cleared away. There were plenty of dances. I was in the middle of the dance floor with Alice, of course. It was a complete setup. Couples around us delicately moved aside a bit to give us space. It was the middle of a song when suddenly a spotlight fell on us. I did 2 quick spins, then dropped to one knee with a ring in my hand. "Alice, since you entered my life, you've captured every thought of mine. You helped me cope with the most challenging situation I could imagine. You are the first thought that comes to my mind when I wake up in the morning and the last thought before I go to sleep at night. I just can't imagine how I'll live the rest of my life without you. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Of course, she said yes. Seriously, people, we planned all of this in advance. I had already signed a prenuptial agreement. She even grabbed me right there on the dance floor and sealed it with a very long, very passionate kiss on my lips. Everyone applauded. This led to Gloria becoming even more enraged because we drew attention away from what was supposed to be her evening. The evening transformed from a divorce party in her honor into an engagement party for Alice and me. Finally, a couple of hours later, she figured it out. Brad, we were supposed to get married right after my divorce was final. Now that it's final, why did your sister just get engaged to my ex-husband, and you haven't even given me a ring yet? We haven't even started planning our wedding, Gloria confronted Brad right in the midst of the social gathering, a part of which she so desperately wanted to be a part of. Well, here's the thing, Gloria, Brad began. I got to know Adam quite well over the last few months when he was dating my sister. He's genuinely a great guy, and we became quite good friends. It occurred to me that if you could be unfaithful to such a wonderful guy like him who gave you nothing but love, what would stop you from betraying me? After all, it was you who ran into me. You even lied to me right at the beginning about being single. As soon as you had to admit that you were married, you gave the impression that you were separating and still heading for a divorce. Talking to Adam about the situation, I learned that you lied about that too. There's absolutely no reason for me to marry such a serial liar and traitor like you. In fact, I'm breaking up with you. I'll give you a week to find new accommodation before I throw all your stuff out on the street. And now, excuse me, there are a couple of single ladies over there that I think I'll go and talk to, Brad replied. Oh, she really tried to fight. She came back with doubled force to try to rectify the divorce. The problem was that there was just too much evidence against her indicating that she voluntarily and essentially insisted on this entirely unfair division of assets. The judge didn't look favorably upon her when she returned and tried to make changes to the divorce on the terms she had insisted on earlier. Alice and I did get married, and yes, an ironclad prenuptial agreement was signed. After all, it was my concern. I asked my lawyer to draft it. Alice thought it was too harsh, but I had already signed it. I really wasn't after her money. No, I wasn't in their league, but I had enough money of my own to take care of myself if something went wrong. I did send Gloria a nice wedding announcement. It had a beautiful photo of Alice and me. Gloria didn't come to our wedding. No, Gloria didn't become homeless. Eventually, she started working at a dive bar and lived in a rundown studio apartment. Now, she buys her clothes at Goodwill and her lingerie at Walmart. In her attempt to switch places, she lost the cozy lifestyle she was accustomed to. She's still a very attractive woman, but news travels fast. She tried a few more times to snag one of the wealthy single men in town, but they all knew her as a gold digger. I saw Gloria again about a year later. Alice and I were returning from dinner at an excellent Italian restaurant on the other side of town. This seems to be Gloria, said Alice, pointing to the street corner. Indeed, when I turned around, there was Gloria. She stood leaning against the building. Her hair was styled but not flawlessly, the skirt was low on her hips and it was short enough to barely cover everything, and that was only if she stood straight. The straps with garters holding stockings were boldly displayed under the skirt hem. I concluded that the reason she leaned against the building was that walking in stilettos on those high heels must be quite challenging. I was actually surprised that I could even recognize her with such bold makeup. Her lips were painted red, and she had thick black eyeshadow. I wasn't sure if it was just very dense mascara or if she had fake eyelashes. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand what's going on here, Alice remarked. Firstly, it was a part of the city known for certain financial transactions. Secondly, there were a few other women in similar attire strolling back and forth. The final clue was that while we were waiting for the green light, another car turned right at the intersection and stopped on the curb in front of her. Gloria approached with an air of importance as the passenger side window rolled down. She leaned into the car and began talking to the driver and his passenger. After a brief conversation, the passenger door opened, and the passenger stepped out of the car. Alice and I watched as the passenger seat was tilted forward, and Gloria and the man slid into the back seat of the car. As the door closed, the car drove away. Alice and I looked at each other and burst into laughter. Story 2. I, a 32-year-old male, was married to my ex-wife, a 28-year-old female, for 2 years. It still shocks me that, after all the promises my ex-wife made to me, she stooped so low and cheated on me. My wife and I first met at my cousin's college graduation ceremony. She had also come to attend her brother's graduation, and we got along well. After the ceremony, she gave me her number at my request, but it took weeks for her to finally take my calls. After weeks of her not taking my calls, I coincidentally bumped into her one day, and she apologized for not taking my calls and offered that we should go to the movies together. Going to the movies was our first date, and from there, multiple dates followed, and we ended up marrying after a year of dating. In the beginning, Mary, my wife, brought me so much happiness. She ticked all my boxes, and everything was smooth between us. She was great in bed, a good cook, and she took good care of me. We were always so happy together, and I loved what we shared. While my wife worked as a data entry clerk, I worked as a heavy machine technician, and what we earned was enough to take care of us. Aside from being happy that I married my wife, I was also glad she had a great family. I grew up with my dad, and he raised me as a single parent. The only cousin I had was my dad's younger sister's daughter. One of the things I always looked forward to was a family of love, and that's what my wife had. She had 2 brothers and 1 sister, plus her parents. Her family was so close to each other, and since we all lived in the same town, we used to hang out once every month as a family unit. Whenever we had a picnic, family dinner, or gathering, all of my wife's siblings would come with their spouses, and this was how I got close to one of her brother-in-laws, my wife's sister's husband. We were around the same age, which allowed us to bond well. Most times, if my wife and her sister were hanging out or going out of town for the wedding of a mutual friend or an extended family member, her brother-in-law and I would go out for a couple of drinks or watch football together. As time passed, he wasn't just my favorite brother-in-law, we became very good friends. Months after my wife and I celebrated a year together, I noticed she was getting closer to her sister's husband. It's not like there was anything wrong with being close to her sister's husband, but I felt something was different with their relationship. Some other changes followed. For example, if we went for a family dinner, my wife would talk to everybody except her brother-in-law, which was very unlike her. And if her brother-in-law and I were hanging out and I mentioned my wife in our conversation, he would avoid the topic and chip in something else regarding their closeness. If we all went somewhere, maybe the park or shopping mall, my wife would prefer to hang with her sister and husband than with me. If we sat at a table to eat together, she would prefer to sit next to him and leave me alone wherever I was. I quietly watched her for months to ensure my head was not messing with me. Around the same time I noticed all these changes, my wife's attitude towards me changed too. It got so bad that we could not converse without her mentioning her brother-in-law's name. Our intimacy dropped too, and she barely allowed me to touch her. Whenever I tried to, she complained about being tired or not being in the mood. Sometimes she'd even say she was having her monthly flow when I knew she wasn't. Before I suspected something was going on between her and her brother-in-law, my wife did not care about her looks whenever we wanted to hang out as a family unit. But she suddenly became so concerned. She'd wash and curl her hair in advance, pick out a dress that would show off her thighs and cleavage, and apply makeup. It became evident that she was trying to look good for a reason, and even her sister and other family members noticed a great difference. The whole time I had been suspecting my wife, deep down I wanted to be wrong. But one night, after waiting for almost an hour for her to stop chatting and blushing at her phone and spend time with me, she said she was tired, as usual, and slept off. I was so hurt by her actions and neglect that I went through her phone to see who had been making her blush like that. When I accessed her phone and went through her social media accounts, I stumbled upon her messages on WhatsApp with her sister's husband. She saved his name as Bestie with 3 love emojis, and I suspected he was the one. Before I opened their conversation, I could not believe what I saw when I went through their conversation. Not only was my wife having an affair with her bestie as I suspected, but they had also exchanged nudes. Even that evening, he had sent her pictures of his private parts and wrote a long erotic text of all the nasty things he would do to her when they met again. They planned to meet in a cheap motel in 2 days, and they kept recounting their last escapade together. I was so disappointed and didn't know how to feel. To even think that they were making jokes about her getting pregnant for him and keeping the child. I felt so betrayed at that moment. I felt like stuffing her with a pillow, but I had to control my anger because she wasn't worth getting a life sentence for. Shortly after I was done with my emotional meltdown, I had an idea to teach her a lesson. So, I took screenshots of their conversation, especially the parts where he sent her his nudes and they mentioned meeting at the motel to have fun. Then, I cleared all traces that I went through her chats that night. I couldn't sleep at home because I was hurt and kept crying like a baby. Even though I suspected something was fishy, I still could not believe my wife would break me like that after all our promises to each other. The following day, I went to work from the motel I spent the night at, and she kept calling me the whole morning to find out why I wasn't at home when she woke up. I cooked up a lie for her and told her I'd be home after work. Meanwhile, the following day, she had planned to meet with my Belle at the motel. She didn't know I had called her sister and explained everything. She was more shocked than I was and promised she would not confront her husband. Also, I created a WhatsApp group chat, added all her close family members to it, and told them everything I found out. I dropped the screenshots I took there so everyone could see, and they couldn't believe it. Her sister kept doubting that my wife would do such a thing to her. After everyone was out of their shock, we all planned to go to the location of the motel they would be using so we could catch them in the act on D-Day, which was a Saturday. I watched as my wife dressed her best, did her makeup, and lied to me, saying she was going to see one of her old-time friends who had just given birth. I acted all calm and watched her as she left. About 10 minutes after she left, I drove to the location and notified her family that she was on the move. Eventually, we all rendezvoused at the motel as planned and decided to go to her room. There were 5 of us, excluding her father. When we got to her room, I knocked and pretended to be room service. She opened the door with a white towel wrapped around her chest. The moment she saw that I was the one, she froze. Then we all entered the room one after the other. Her brother-in-law was in the bathroom, and when he heard voices and came out to see us, he ran back into the bathroom and refused to come out. My sister-in-law was so heartbroken, and she attacked my wife right there. I told her to her face not to bother coming home and that she'd be hearing from my lawyer soon. Her mom and brothers could not even say anything to her. They all stood there in awe. I left the room and left them there so she could deal with her family. Immediately I got home, I threw her stuff out of my house and contacted a divorce lawyer to start processing her divorce papers. She tried to call me and beg a couple of times, and I told her she was insane to think I'd take back a shameless cheat like her. The worst part was that she had no one to turn to. Her family disowned her, and her sister cut all ties with her because she couldn't handle the betrayal. I had to divorce her and officially get rid of her. Her sister also divorced her husband, and my wife had to move in with her friend before she left town. Later, I found out that their affair started under my roof and they had it going long before I suspected something was happening. My wife claimed she continued the affair with her Belle because he was not as boring as me. I guess you will have enough fun living with disappointed family members for the rest of her life. I'm fine now, but I've decided not to marry again. It's better to be alone so I don't experience such disappointment and heartbreak again. OP, you did a great thing by divorcing your ex-wife, and her sister did the right thing. Indeed, she is a shameless cheat and had no shame in cheating with her sister's husband. Ignore what she said. OP, you being boring had nothing to do with this. She only used that as an excuse. It's a stupid excuse, by the way. You should be glad you found out earlier. If not, you would have raised her brother-in-law's child. Concerning marrying again, it's all up to you. You don't have to if you don't want to. Most women have no shame. Sadly, it's becoming a norm. Anyways, I'm happy to hear you're doing better. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Story 3. My name is Lucas. My ex-wife, Aria, and I were married for 3 years before we went our separate ways. Aria and I lived in the same town, but I did not know her until I was 25. Even with that, we didn't start dating until 4 years ago. We dated for a year, and we were married for 3 years. I know this might sound simple-like, but meeting Aria was love at first sight. I liked her the instant I met her, and I had this conviction that she would be the woman I would spend the rest of my life with. She was intelligent, hardworking, and pretty, and I felt we were a match made in heaven. Even though she gave me a tough time before we dated, I didn't mind waiting for her until she was mine. Fast forward to after we got married, I was literally the happiest man on earth. Although I did not express myself so much, I was glad we were finally married. Everything was blissful for the first 2 years and some months of our marriage. We enjoyed each other's company and literally did everything together. For a long time, I had been hoping to find a woman who would love me wholeheartedly, and when Aria came into my life, I was relieved. While we were married, Arya and I didn't have so many issues, and we knew it was very normal for us to butt heads from time to time, and we understood that. We tried as much as possible to settle whatever issue we had before it got to the extent of keeping malice with each other. Arya was someone who loved to hang out and party with her friends, and I was someone who loved to stay home and watch television. I barely went out, except it was extremely important. In fact, I would prefer to cancel on my friends and stay at home to rest or do something for myself. For once, I never stopped Arya from doing her thing. I supported her and allowed her to go out with her friends as much as she wanted during weekdays, and then on weekends, we would spend quality time together at home. The reason I never had issues with her always going out with her friends was that I trusted her, and I didn't expect that she would do anything to hurt me or even cheat on me. I also kept to my promise and didn't do anything that would hurt Arya. Even before we remarried, I stopped talking to a couple of girls I used to, not because they were bad people, but because hanging around them always would lead me to temptation. Also, Arya had told me about her ex-boyfriend and how she was hurt and heartbroken when she found out he was cheating on her with multiple partners, and I didn't want to cause her that kind of pain again. This was why she didn't say yes to me the first few times I asked her out. She claimed she was still deeply hurt and needed to be sure she had healed properly before entering another relationship. I had also been hurt in my previous relationship, but that was a very long time ago, so I could relate to her feelings, and we assured each other that we would never cheat or do anything that would cause us pain. We agreed not to have kids yet because we wanted to spend time with ourselves and ensure that we were not holding ourselves back so our kids would enjoy the full love of their parents. Things were fine between us, and even as Arya continued to go out, I never suspected anything off. Nothing changed about her. She still acted, dressed, took care of me, and did her wifely duties. So, I was so shocked one day when I received a call from a friend of mine to come and take my wife. This friend of mine who called was a hotel manager in a very popular tourist hotel in our town. We lived in a very small town, so almost everyone, young and old, knew the hotel. When he called me to come and get my wife from the hotel, I was shocked because that wasn't where Arya told me she was going. She told me she was hanging out with her other girlfriends at one of their friends' family restaurants. I even dropped her there myself. At first, I tried to explain to him that he was mistaken and might have seen someone who looked like Arya, but he insisted that she was the one and that I should come over. The distance from the restaurant where I dropped Arya was almost a 45-minute drive to the hotel, meaning she left immediately after I dropped her there. Confused and curious to find out what was happening, I drove to the hotel and found Arya there. She was with an employee of the hotel, and the police were already involved. When I asked them to explain what was going on, I was informed that she was trespassing and that the employee I saw her with promised to give her a free room. They planned to spend hours together, but somehow they were caught. I was so surprised and disappointed at the same time. It felt like a dream or a prank. I wanted to say something like, "We were only pulling your legs," but when that didn't happen, it struck me that Arya had been cheating on me the whole time. In addition, the employee confessed that it wasn't the first time they did so, and it had been going on for weeks. Meanwhile, while the employee confessed, Arya was already on her knees, begging me not to listen to them, that she was being framed. I knew she was lying because she wasn't kidnapped to the hotel. She went there by herself to sleep with the employee. Since the manager was my friend, he wanted to let me know before he pressed charges. I was so embarrassed and heartbroken, and I even encouraged him to press charges so he could deal with Arya as he wanted. Arya was shocked when she heard my response, and her tears intensified. She begged me to talk to my friend, but my mind was made up. When she saw that I wasn't begging my friend, she begged me to take her home. I didn't say anything to her, and I watched as she cried and begged. Her affair partner was fired on the spot, and they were both arrested. To humiliate her more, I recorded her and her affair partner as they were being arrested, and after they were taken away, I posted it online. I also posted and announced on our local town's Facebook group that she was cheating on me and having an affair at a hotel with an employee. Most people in the group knew us, and that's how the news got to everyone. By the time she was bailed out by her parents, she and her affair partner were the talk of town, and they faced a lot of ridicule. It was very shameful, and even her close friends deserted her. It was hilarious when she tried to come home and beg me. She said she couldn't explain what pushed her to cheat on me and that she was so sorry. She claimed she still loved me and wanted us to work out, but I told her it wasn't possible. Even after she took her things out of my house and we divorced, she kept begging and crying. She even asked her best friend to try and talk to me, but I warned her and asked her to leave my house. It's been 1 year since it happened, but it still feels like yesterday. I'm having a tough time moving on, but I know that one day this will be a long-forgotten history. As for her affair partner, I don't know what happened to him, but I do know Aria did not end up with him. OP, I must admit that your ex-wife was a pretty good liar. People don't just wake up and realize they cheated on their partners. They do it with their senses intact. They do it for a reason. And your ex-wife only tried to manipulate you by saying she didn't know what pushed her. It's a good thing you didn't fall for such cheap lies, and you need to move on. I'm sure your ex-wife has moved on, and you're already history to her, so do yourself a favor and get out of the past.